Dante Caruso had built an empire on reading people. 36 years of watching, waiting, and knowing exactly when someone was lying, stealing, or planning to betray him. He could spot a threat from across a crowded room, identify weakness in a handshake, and calculate the exact moment fear turned to desperation in a man's eyes. So when the new hire walked into the legitimate side of his operations that Tuesday morning, Dante knew within 30 seconds the kid was going to be a problem. Not because of his resume. 24 years old, business degree from a decent school, eager to prove himself in the import-export company that served as the clean face of the Caruso family operations. The kind of ambitious, hungry young man who asked too few questions and worked too many hours, which made him exactly the type Dante's HR department loved to hire. No, the problem wasn't the kid's credentials. It was where he couldn't stop looking. Dante stood in the hallway outside the main office floor, coffee in hand, watching through the glass partition as his operations manager walked the new hire through the maze of desks. The tour followed the same route it always did. Filing systems, break room, conference spaces, and then, inevitably, past the corner office where Isabella Romano sat surrounded by 3 monitors, her dark hair twisted up in a clip, phone pressed to her ear while her fingers flew across the keyboard. The kid's steps slowed. His head turned. And Dante's jaw tightened as he watched the new hire's gaze drag down the curve of Isabella's neck, linger on the fitted lines of her burgundy blouse, and track the movement of her hand as she gestured while talking. Isabella didn't notice. She was too focused on whatever fire she was putting out, her brow furrowed in concentration, that little crease appearing between her eyes that showed up whenever someone was wasting her time with incompetence. Dante noticed everything. The operations manager tugged the new hire along, but not before the kid glanced back over his shoulder one more time. Dante took a slow sip of his coffee and made a mental note. By lunch, he'd watched it happen 3 more times. The new hire found excuses to walk past Isabella's office, needed to ask a question about filing protocols, had to check on something in the storage room that happened to be in her line of sight, took the long route to the break room that passed directly by her door. Each time, his attention lingered just a fraction too long. His gaze dropped to places it had no business going. And each time, Dante felt something cold and sharp settle deeper in his chest. Isabella Romano had worked for him for 2 years. She'd started as a financial analyst, brought in to clean up the legitimate business accounting that had gotten sloppy under the previous management. Within 6 months, she'd restructured the entire department, identified 3 areas of waste that had cost them hundreds of thousands, and somehow managed to make the books cleaner than they'd ever been, while still leaving room for the necessary creative accounting his other operations required. She was brilliant, efficient, and completely unaware that half the men in the office had spent her first year trying to work up the courage to ask her out. They'd learned quickly that Isabella Romano didn't date coworkers, didn't mix business with pleasure, kept her personal life locked down tighter than the family's offshore accounts. Dante had made it clear, in the way he made everything clear, that she was off limits. Not explicitly. He didn't need to be explicit. A word here, a look there, and everyone understood that Isabella's position in the company was secured by her competence, not her availability, and anyone who made her uncomfortable would find themselves transferred to less pleasant assignments, like the shipping warehouse. In January. With the broken heating system Dante never seemed to get around to fixing. The message had been received. Until today. Dante finished his coffee and made his way down to the main floor. He moved through the office with the easy confidence of a man who owned everything he surveyed, nodding to employees who straightened at their desks when he passed. His suit was tailored perfectly, charcoal gray with subtle pinstripes, the kind of expensive simplicity that announced power without shouting it. He found the new hire lingering near the copy machine, which happened to be positioned with a direct view into Isabella's office. "First day going well?" Dante asked, his tone conversational. The kid jumped, nearly dropping the papers he was holding. "Mr. Caruso, yes, sir. Everyone's been very welcoming." "Good." Dante glanced toward Isabella's office, then back to the new hire. "You're finding everything you need?" "Yes, sir. The operations manager has been very thorough." "Excellent." Dante let the silence stretch just long enough to become uncomfortable. "You seem to have a lot of questions about the filing systems near Miss Romano's office." The kid's face flushed. "I just want to make sure I understand the protocols." "Of course." Dante's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Ms. Romano is our senior financial analyst. She's very good at her job. Very focused. She doesn't appreciate interruptions." "I haven't interrupted her, sir." "No," Dante agreed. "You haven't." The unspoken yet hung in the air between them. The kid swallowed hard and found somewhere else to look. Dante walked away, but he didn't go far. He had meetings scheduled, calls to make, and a shipment coming in tonight that required his personal attention. But he found himself tracking Isabella's movements throughout the day with the same careful awareness he applied to everything in his world that mattered. She left her office at 1:30 for lunch, her heels clicking against the polished floor as she headed for the elevator. She'd changed the clip in her hair, he noticed. The morning's simple twist had been replaced with something that left a few dark strands falling loose around her face. She had her phone in one hand and her bag in the other, and she was frowning at whatever message had just come through. The new hire watched her go. Dante made another mental note. At 4 o'clock, Isabella appeared in his doorway. Dante's office occupied the entire corner of the top floor, with windows overlooking the city and enough space to hold meetings, entertain clients, or remind people exactly who they were dealing with. His desk was clean except for a laptop and a single file folder. Everything else was locked away in cabinets that required fingerprint access and contained information that would never see the inside of a courtroom. "You have a minute?" Isabella asked. "For you. Always." She stepped inside and closed the door behind her, which meant this was business, not casual conversation. Isabella was careful about appearances, professional to a fault. She never gave anyone reason to question her position or whisper about favoritism. It was one of the things Dante respected most about her, and one of the things that made him want to pull those carefully constructed walls down and see what she was hiding underneath. "The quarterly reports are ready for your review," she said, crossing to his desk and setting down a tablet. "I've flagged 3 areas that need your attention before the board meeting." Dante took the tablet but didn't look at it. He looked at her instead. At the way her burgundy blouse had come slightly untucked on one side. At the faint shadows under her eyes that suggested she'd stayed late last night finishing these reports. At the small gold necklace resting against her collarbone that he'd never seen her wear before. "You stayed late again," he said. "The numbers needed to be perfect. They always are." "Then you're welcome." She raised an eyebrow. "Are you going to review those or just stare at me?" "Can't I do both?" Isabella's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her dark eyes. Amusement, maybe, or exasperation. With her, it was hard to tell. "The board meeting is Thursday. You'll need to be familiar with the discrepancies in the shipping costs." "Discrepancies." "Creative accounting," she corrected. "Legal creative accounting, mostly." "Your confidence is reassuring." "My accuracy is reassuring. My confidence is just a bonus." She turned to leave, then paused. "The new hire seems enthusiastic." Dante's attention sharpened. "You've spoken to him?" "No, but he's walked past my office about 15 times today. Either he's lost, or he's conducting some kind of surveillance operation." "Does it bother you?" Isabella shrugged, the movement casual, but Dante caught the slight tension in her shoulders. "I've worked in offices before. There's always someone who hasn't learned professional boundaries yet. He'll figure it out, or he won't last." "He won't last," Dante said quietly. She looked at him then, really looked at him, and for a moment, something passed between them. An understanding. An acknowledgement of the protection he offered and the authority he wielded. I can handle unwanted attention, Isabella said carefully. I know you can. But you're going to handle it anyway. Yes. That's very caveman of you. I prefer to think of it as effective management. Dante set the tablet down and leaned back in his chair, studying her. You're a valuable asset to this company, Ms. Romano. I protect my assets. Is that what I am? An asset? Among other things. Isabella's lips curved slightly, not quite a smile, but close enough to make Dante's pulse kick up a notch. I should get back to work. Those reports won't analyze themselves. Isabella. She stopped at the door, her hand on the handle. The necklace is new, Dante said. Her free hand went to her collarbone, fingers brushing the delicate gold chain. It was my grandmother's. I found it while cleaning out her apartment last weekend. It suits you. Thank you. She hesitated, then added, You notice too much. Only when it comes to things that matter. She left without responding, but Dante saw the faint color in her cheeks as she walked away. He returned his attention to the tablet, scanning through the reports with the practiced eye of someone who'd been balancing legitimate business with less legitimate operations for over a decade. Isabella's work was, as always, impeccable. Every number accounted for, every discrepancy explained in language that would satisfy auditors while hiding the truth beneath layers of corporate complexity. She was wasted on financial analysis. She should be running her own company, building her own empire. But she was here, working for him, and Dante wasn't noble enough to suggest she deserved better. At 6:30, most of the office had cleared out. Dante made his way back down to the main floor, ostensibly to check on something in the operations department. In reality, he wanted to see if the new hire had taken the hint. He found his answer in the parking garage. Isabella's car was parked in her assigned spot, 3rd row from the elevator. She was loading her bag into the trunk when the new hire appeared, seemingly out of nowhere, his own bag slung over his shoulder. Ms. Romano, the kid said, his smile too wide, too eager. Heading out? Isabella straightened, her expression polite but distant. Yes, long day. Tell me about it. First days are exhausting. He moved closer, closing the distance between them in a way that made Dante's hands curl into fists. I was hoping maybe you could give me some advice about the company culture, how to succeed here. Maybe over coffee sometime? I'm sure HR can answer any questions you have about company culture, Isabella said smoothly. They're very thorough. I was thinking more informal, just 2 coworkers getting to know each other. I don't socialize with coworkers outside the office. Never? Never. The kid laughed like she'd made a joke. Come on, everyone needs to unwind after work. 1 coffee. What's the harm? Isabella closed her trunk with more force than necessary. The harm is that I've said no, and you're still standing here. Dante stepped out from behind the concrete pillar where he'd been watching. Is there a problem? He asked, his voice carrying across the parking garage. Both of them turned. Isabella's expression remained neutral, but something in her posture relaxed slightly. The new hire's face went pale. Mr. Caruso, the kid stammered. No problem, just talking. Talking. Dante walked toward them with measured steps, each footfall echoing in the concrete space. On Ms. Romano's first day, did anyone mention our policy about harassment? I wasn't harassing anyone, sir. I just asked about coffee, and she said no. I was being friendly. You were being persistent. Dante stopped directly between them, his body angled toward the new hire in a way that was unmistakably protective of Isabella. There's a difference. A smart man learns to recognize it. The kid's jaw tightened. With all due respect, sir, I was just trying to make connections in the company. Make them somewhere else. Dante's tone dropped, losing all pretense of civility. Ms. Romano has made her boundaries clear. If you can't respect them, you won't be here long enough to worry about company culture. Are you threatening me? I'm educating you. Dante smiled, and it was the smile that made grown men reconsider their life choices. Consider it a learning opportunity on your first day. Don't waste it. The new hire looked at Isabella, then back at Dante, clearly trying to calculate his next move. Whatever he saw in Dante's expression made the decision for him. Understood, sir, he muttered, and walked away toward his own car. Dante waited until the kid's engine started and his taillights disappeared up the ramp before turning to Isabella. She was leaning against her car, arms crossed, watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. That was subtle, she said. I wasn't aiming for subtle. Clearly. She tilted her head, studying him. He's going to be gone by tomorrow, isn't he? Would you prefer he stays? I'd prefer to handle my own problems. You were handling it, Dante said. I just expedited the solution by threatening to fire him on his first day. I didn't threaten anything. I educated him about company policy. We don't have a policy about asking coworkers to coffee. We do now, Isabella laughed, the sound unexpected and genuine, and Dante felt something warm settle in his chest. She didn't laugh often. Smiled occasionally, usually when someone said something particularly stupid in a meeting. But real laughter was rare. He wanted to hear it again. You're impossible, she said. I'm effective. That's what all tyrants say. Tyrant seems harsh. I prefer benevolent dictator. There's nothing benevolent about firing someone for asking me to coffee. I haven't fired him yet, Dante pointed out. I'm giving him until tomorrow to demonstrate better judgment. Isabella shook her head, but she was still smiling. You know I can take care of myself, right? I've dealt with worse than overeager new hires. I know. Dante moved closer, close enough to catch the faint scent of her perfume, something subtle and expensive that he'd never been able to identify. But you shouldn't have to. Not here. Because I'm a valuable asset? Because you're under my protection. The words hung between them, heavier than he'd intended, more revealing. Isabella's smile faded, replaced by something more serious, more aware. Dante. Go home, Isabella, he said, stepping back before he did something stupid like reach for her. It's been a long day. She hesitated, then nodded and slid into her car. He watched her drive away, her taillights disappearing into the evening traffic. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. Tony? The new hire in operations. Yeah, the kid who started today. I want him gone by morning. Find a reason. I don't care what it is, just make sure it's documented properly. He ended the call and stood alone in the parking garage, thinking about the way Isabella had said his name, like a warning or an invitation. He wasn't sure which, but he was going to find out. The new hire was gone by Wednesday morning. Isabella noticed his empty desk when she arrived at 7:30, coffee in hand, her heels clicking against the polished floor in the rhythm that had become as familiar to her as breathing. The operations manager was already reassigning his workload, his expression carefully neutral in the way that told her this hadn't been a voluntary departure. She should have been surprised. She wasn't. What surprised her was the small, traitorous part of herself that felt relieved. Isabella had meant what she'd said in the parking garage. She could handle unwanted attention, had been handling it since she was 16, and developed curves that made grown men forget she was still in high school. She'd learned early how to shut down advances with a look, a word, the strategic deployment of professional distance that turned her into someone untouchable. But Dante Caruso had handled it for her, and she didn't know what to do with that information. She settled into her office, pulling up spreadsheets and financial projections that needed her attention before the board meeting tomorrow. Numbers were safe, predictable. They followed rules that made sense, unlike the way her pulse had kicked up when Dante had stepped between her and the new hire, his body language screaming protection and possession in equal measure. She was halfway through reconciling the shipping accounts when her desk phone rang. "Ms. Romano, Mr. Caruso would like to see you in his office." Isabella glanced at the clock. 8:15. Early, even for Dante, who kept hours that suggested he never actually slept. "I'll be right up." She saved her work, grabbed the tablet with the board meeting notes, and made her way to the elevator. The ride to the top floor gave her exactly 43 seconds to compose herself, to lock away the awareness that had been humming under her skin since last night. Dante's assistant waved her through without comment. She found him standing at the windows, phone pressed to his ear, his free hand shoved in his pocket. The morning light caught the sharp lines of his profile, the precise cut of his dark hair, the way his suit jacket stretched across shoulders that were broader than any CEO had a right to possess. He looked like power personified, and he was looking at her. He ended the call without taking his eyes off her. "Close the door." Isabella did, then crossed to his desk. "You wanted to see me?" "The new hire won't be returning." "I noticed. Does that bother you?" "Should it?" She set the tablet down and met his gaze directly. "You made your intentions clear last night. I assumed you'd follow through." "And?" "And nothing. It's your company. Your decision." She paused. "Though I'm curious what reason you documented for his termination. Failed background check." "Did he actually fail?" "He failed my background check." Dante moved away from the windows, circling around to lean against the front of his desk, close enough that she could see the faint shadow of stubble along his jaw. "Which includes not making my senior financial analyst uncomfortable in parking garages. That's not a standard HR metric. It is now." Isabella should have been annoyed, should have pointed out that she hadn't asked for this kind of protection, that she was perfectly capable of handling her own problems. Instead, she found herself asking, "Do you do this for all your employees?" "No. Just me. Just you." The admission hung between them, honest and unadorned. No excuses, no deflection. Just the simple truth that she was different, that he treated her differently, that whatever this was between them had moved beyond professional courtesy into territory neither of them had acknowledged out loud. "Why?" she asked. Dante's gaze dropped to her mouth, then back to her eyes. "You're asking questions you already know the answers to, Isabella. Maybe I want to hear you say it." "No, you don't." He smiled slightly. "You want me to keep it professional. Keep it safe. Maintain the boundaries that let you pretend you don't feel this too." Her breath caught. Not because he was wrong, but because he was absolutely right. "This is inappropriate," she said, completely. "I don't date people I work for." "I know. Then what are we doing?" "Right now?" Dante straightened, closing the distance between them until she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. "I'm noticing that you changed your perfume. Something lighter today. Citrus instead of flowers. That's not an answer. You're also wearing different earrings, small hoops instead of studs. And you didn't finish your coffee this morning because there's still lipstick on the lid, which means you got distracted before you could drink it." Isabella's heart was doing something complicated in her chest. "You're deflecting." "I'm observing." His hand came up, not touching her, just hovering near her jaw in a gesture that was somehow more intimate than actual contact. "You want to know what we're doing? We're standing too close in my office at 8:30 in the morning, having a conversation that could get us both in trouble with HR. You are HR. Then I'll fire myself for inappropriate conduct." His thumb brushed her cheek, barely a whisper of contact. "After I figure out why you're looking at me like that." "Like what?" "Like you're trying to decide if I'm dangerous." "Are you?" The question came out softer than she'd intended. Dante's expression shifted, something dark and honest moving behind his eyes. "Yes, but not to you." Isabella should have stepped back, should have put distance between them, and reminded him about professional boundaries and company policies. Instead, she heard herself say, "The new hire asked me to coffee. You got him fired. That's a disproportionate response. He made you uncomfortable." "Lots of things make me uncomfortable. You can't fire everyone who does. Watch me." "That's insane." "That's effective." His hand dropped away, but he didn't move back. "I protect what's mine, Isabella. I'm not yours. Not yet." The words landed like a challenge, like a promise. Isabella's professional instincts screamed at her to shut this down, to remind him that she was his employee, that this crossed every line they'd carefully maintained for 2 years. But there was another part of her, quieter and more honest, that wanted to ask what he meant by yet. Wanted to know what it would feel like to be claimed by a man like Dante Caruso. Wanted to stop pretending she hadn't been aware of him since her first day, when he'd walked into her interview and she'd felt the entire room shift around his presence. "This is a bad idea," she said finally. "Probably. I should go back to work." "You should." Neither of them moved. The moment stretched, heavy with everything they weren't saying, until Dante's phone buzzed against his desk. He glanced at it, and whatever he saw there made his expression harden. "I have a call," he said, his tone shifting back to business. "We'll continue this conversation later." "Will we?" "Yes." He picked up his phone, but his attention stayed on her. "And Isabella? Next time someone makes you uncomfortable, I want to know about it immediately. So you can fire them? So I can decide how to handle it." "That's very dictatorial of you." "You say that like it's a criticism." Isabella shook her head and headed for the door, but his voice stopped her before she could leave. "Isabella." She looked back. "The perfume change," he said. "It suits you, but I prefer the other one." She left before she could ask how he'd noticed in the first place. The rest of the day passed in a blur of meetings and financial projections, but Isabella couldn't shake the conversation from her mind. Dante's words played on repeat, especially the part about not yet, about protecting what was his. She should have been offended by the possessiveness. Instead, she was curious. By 5 o'clock, she'd given up pretending to focus on work. She packed up her things and headed for the elevator, already planning the evening ahead. Wine, a hot bath, and some serious thinking about whether she was willing to cross the line Dante had drawn so clearly between them. The elevator doors opened on the parking garage level, and she stepped out into the concrete space, her keys already in hand. She made it 3 steps before she realized something was wrong. The man leaning against her car wasn't Dante. He was younger, mid-20s maybe, with the kind of expensive casual wear that screamed money without taste. His smile was sharp and unfriendly as he straightened when he saw her. "Isabella Romano," he said, like he was tasting her name. "I've been waiting for you." Isabella stopped walking, her instincts screaming danger. "Do I know you?" "I'm Marco," he said. "Marco Vitale. But you know my cousin." He pushed off her car and moved toward her. "The one who got fired this morning for asking you to coffee. Seems a little harsh, don't you think?" Her pulse kicked up, but she kept her voice steady. "Your cousin failed a background check. That's standard company policy." "That's bullshit." He was closer now, too close, invading the space she'd deliberately kept between them. "Everyone knows Caruso got rid of him because of you. Because he's got a thing for his pretty financial analyst and doesn't like competition." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you don't." His gaze dragged down her body in a way that made her skin crawl. "My cousin just wanted to be friendly. Instead, he gets blacklisted from every decent company in the city because Dante Caruso decided to mark his territory." Isabella's hand tightened around her keys, positioning them between her fingers the way her self-defense instructor had taught her. "You should leave. I should teach you a lesson about getting people fired." He reached for her arm. He never made contact. Dante appeared out of nowhere, his hand closing around the man's wrist with enough force to make him yelp. In one smooth motion, he twisted the man's arm behind his back and slammed him face first against the concrete pillar. "Touch her," Dante said quietly, "and I'll break every bone in your hand before I move on to more important parts." "Jesus, Caruso, I wasn't going to hurt her. You were thinking about it." Dante's voice was cold, flat, the tone of a man who'd done worse things to better people. "I could see it in your eyes, the same look your cousin had yesterday. Like she's something you're entitled to because she's beautiful and you're too stupid to understand the word no." Isabella stood frozen, watching Dante hold the man against the pillar with casual, terrifying ease. This wasn't the CEO who reviewed financial reports in tailored suits. This was the other Dante, the one she'd heard whispers about but never seen. The one who ran an empire built on violence and power. "I'm sorry," the man gasped. "I just wanted to talk." "You wanted to intimidate her because your cousin got fired for being a creep." Dante leaned in closer. "Let me be very clear about something. Isabella Romano is under my protection. That means if you come near her, if you call her, if you so much as think about her, I will know. And what happens next won't be a conversation in a parking garage. It'll be a visit from people who don't ask questions before they act. Do you understand?" "Yes. God. Yes. I understand." Dante released him with a shove that sent the man stumbling. "Get out, and tell your cousin he's lucky all he lost was a job." The man ran, literally ran, toward the exit ramp. Dante turned to Isabella, his expression shifting from cold fury to something gentler but no less intense. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "How did you know he was here?" "I have cameras in the parking garage. My security team alerted me the moment he approached your car." He moved toward her, his hands coming up to frame her face, tilting it toward the light. "Did he touch you?" "No. You stopped him before." She broke off, suddenly aware of how close Dante was, how his thumbs were brushing her cheekbones, how his eyes were scanning her face like he was cataloging every detail to make sure she was unharmed. "Before what?" His voice dropped, dangerous again. "Before anything happened." She should step back, should put distance between them. Instead, she found herself leaning into his touch. "You didn't have to threaten him like that." "Yes, I did. Dante. He came here to scare you, Isabella, to punish you for his cousin's mistakes. Do you think a polite conversation would have changed his mind?" His hands tightened slightly on her face. "Men like that only understand power, so I showed him power. By threatening to break his bones. I was being generous. What I wanted to do was much worse." Isabella believed him, could see it in the tension still riding his shoulders, the barely controlled violence humming beneath his surface. "This is who you are, not just the CEO. The other part. Yes, the part people whisper about. Yes, I should be scared of you." Dante's expression softened slightly. "But you're not. No." And that was the truth. She wasn't scared of him. She was scared of what she felt when he looked at her like this, like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. "I should be, though. Normal people would be." "You've never been normal, Isabella. That's why you're still here." He stepped back, his hands dropping away, leaving her skin cold where he'd touched her. "I'm having someone escort you home tonight, and every night until I'm sure there won't be any more surprise visits." "That's not necessary. It's not negotiable." His tone left no room for argument. "You can accept the escort, or I can follow you myself. Your choice." Isabella stared at him, recognizing the immovable wall she'd just hit. "You're serious?" "Completely. This is insane. This is protection." He pulled out his phone and typed something quickly. "Tony will meet you at the elevator in 5 minutes. He'll follow you home and make sure your building is secure." "I don't need a bodyguard. You have one anyway." Dante looked at her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. "I told you, Isabella, I protect what's mine. And whether you're ready to admit it or not, you're mine." That's incredibly presumptuous. That's incredibly true. He moved closer again, crowding into her space in a way that should have felt threatening, but instead felt like safety. "You can fight it. Tell yourself this is just professional concern, that I'd do this for any employee. But we both know that's a lie." "Dante." "Tomorrow night," he interrupted. "After the board meeting. You're having dinner with me." "That's not a request." "No, it's not." "What if I say no?" His smile was slow and dangerous. "You won't." He was right, and they both knew it. Isabella watched him walk away toward the elevator, his phone already pressed to his ear, issuing orders to people she'd never meet about security measures she didn't want to think about. 5 minutes later, a man built like a tank appeared at her car and introduced himself as Tony. He followed her home in a black SUV, waited while she parked, and walked her to her building's entrance. "Mr. Caruso wants you to call him when you're inside," Tony said. "Of course he does." Tony's expression didn't change, but she caught the hint of amusement in his eyes. "He's very thorough, ma'am." That's one word for it. She rode the elevator to her apartment, unlocked her door, and stood in her living room for a long moment before pulling out her phone. Dante answered on the first ring. "You're home." "Yes. Your security guard was very professional." "Good. Lock your door." "Already done. Deadbolt, too." Isabella walked back and engaged the deadbolt, the sound loud in the quiet apartment. "Satisfied?" "Not even close." His voice dropped, intimate and rough. "But it's a start. This is crazy, Dante, all of this. The security, the protection, the dinner tomorrow." "I know." "Then why?" "Because I'm done pretending, Isabella. Done watching you walk past my office every day and pretending I don't want you. Done letting other men think they have a chance when we both know they don't." He paused. "Tomorrow night. 8 o'clock. I'll pick you up." "What if I'm not ready for this?" "Then I'll wait." The certainty in his voice was absolute. "But I won't stop protecting you. I won't stop wanting you. And eventually, you'll stop fighting what you feel too." He ended the call before she could respond. Isabella stood in her apartment, phone in hand, and admitted the truth she'd been avoiding for months. She'd already stopped fighting. Part 3. The board meeting ran long. Isabella sat at the conference table, presenting quarterly financial projections to 12 men in expensive suits who nodded along like they understood half of what she was saying. She'd learned early that numbers intimidated most people, even powerful ones. They saw spreadsheets and formulas, and their eyes glazed over, trusting her expertise because questioning it would reveal their own ignorance. Dante sat at the head of the table, his attention fixed on her with an intensity that had nothing to do with profit margins. She could feel his gaze tracking her movements as she walked them through the revenue forecasts, the way his fingers drummed once against the table when she leaned over to point out a specific data point. Every person in this room thought he was focused on business. Isabella knew better. "The shipping division shows a 12% increase over last quarter," she continued, advancing the slide. "However, I've identified some irregularities in the overseas accounts that warrant further investigation." "What kind of irregularities?" one of the board members asked. "Payments that don't align with documented shipments. Small amounts, spread across multiple transactions. Could be clerical errors, but I'd recommend an audit." Dante's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "How small? Individually? A few thousand. Collectively over 6 months, nearly 200,000. The room went quiet. "I want a full report by Monday," Dante said. "Isabella, you'll lead the audit personally." "Of course." The meeting wrapped up 20 minutes later. Isabella gathered her materials while the board members filed out. their conversations shifting to golf and weekend plans. She was sliding her tablet into her bag when she felt him behind her. "Someone's stealing from me," Dante said quietly. "It appears that way. And you found it. That's my job." She turned to face him. "Though I'm guessing this complicates things for you." "Everything about you complicates things for me." He moved closer, his hand coming up to straighten the collar of her blouse in a gesture that was far too intimate for a conference room. "But we'll deal with the theft later. Right now, I'm more interested in whether you're going to try to cancel our dinner." The thought crossed my mind. And I'm here, aren't I?" His smile was slow and satisfied. "That you are. Go home, Isabella. Change into something that doesn't scream financial analyst. I'll pick you up at 8. You still haven't told me where we're going." "Somewhere public enough to be respectable." His thumb brushed her jaw. "Private enough to be dangerous." He left before she could respond, and Isabella stood alone in the conference room, her skin still warm where he'd touched her. This was happening. She was letting this happen. And the terrifying part was how much she wanted it to. Dante arrived at exactly 8 o'clock, driving a black Maserati that probably cost more than her annual salary. Isabella watched from her window as he got out, his charcoal suit replaced by dark jeans, and a black button-down that made him look less like a CEO and more like the dangerous man she'd seen in the parking garage. Her phone buzzed. "Come down, Bella, before I come up." Isabella grabbed her purse and headed downstairs, her heels clicking against the marble lobby floor. She'd changed 3 times before settling on a deep green dress that hugged her curves without being obvious about it, paired with heels that added 3 inches to her height. Dante's expression when he saw her made every minute of indecision worth it. "You're trying to kill me," he said. "I'm wearing a dress." "You're wearing that dress." His gaze dragged down her body and back up, slow and deliberate. "Get in the car before I do something that'll scandalize your neighbors." Isabella slid into the passenger seat, the leather cool against her bare legs. Dante closed her door and rounded to the driver's side, his movements controlled but charged with something that made the air feel electric. "Where are we going?" she asked as he pulled into traffic. "Moretti's." Isabella's breath caught. Moretti's was the restaurant in the city, exclusive, expensive, and owned by a family that everyone knew had ties to organized crime. It was also impossible to get a reservation unless you had the kind of connections that came with power and influence. "That's very public," she said. "That's the point. People will see us together." "Good." He glanced at her, his hand moving from the gear shift to her thigh, warm and possessive. "I'm done hiding what I want, Isabella. Anyone who sees us tonight will know exactly what you are to me. And what am I to you? Mine." The word settled between them, heavy with promise and possession. Isabella should have argued, should have reminded him that she hadn't agreed to be anyone's anything. Instead, she found herself asking, "What if I'm not ready for everyone to know?" "Then you shouldn't have worn that dress." His hand tightened on her thigh. "Because every man in that restaurant is going to look at you, and I'm going to make sure they all understand you're not available." "How?" Dante smiled, dark and certain. "You'll see." Moretti's was everything Isabella expected. Dim lighting, white tablecloths, the kind of quiet elegance that came with a price tag most people couldn't afford. The maitre d' greeted Dante by name and led them to a corner table that offered both privacy and visibility. Isabella noticed the looks as they crossed the restaurant. Recognition, curiosity, calculation. Dante Caruso didn't bring women to Moretti's. The fact that he was here with her would be all over the city's social circles by morning. "You're making a statement," she said once they were seated. "I'm making several." He ordered wine without consulting the menu, then turned his full attention on her. "Tell me something I don't know about you." "Like what?" "Anything. Something real." Isabella considered him across the candlelight. "I grew up in Brooklyn. My father was a mechanic. My mother taught elementary school. They saved for 10 years to send me to college. They're proud of you. They were. They died in a car accident my senior year. She saw his expression shift, sympathy and understanding moving behind his eyes. I finished my degree on scholarship money and spite. Spite? Everyone expected me to drop out, go home, get married, give up on the fancy career dreams. She smiled slightly. I don't like being told what I can't do. I've noticed. Dante reached across the table and took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. That's why you're still fighting this, because I told you it was inevitable. Maybe I just don't like being claimed like property. You're not property, Isabella. You're a choice I'm making every single day. His grip tightened. The difference is, I'm done pretending I have any other options. The wine arrived, interrupting the moment. Isabella used the distraction to pull her hand back, trying to regain some equilibrium, but Dante wasn't letting her retreat. Your turn, she said. Tell me something real. I killed a man when I was 19. The admission landed like a bomb between them. Isabella stared at him, searching his face for signs of regret or shame. She found neither, just honesty, brutal and unadorned. Why? She asked. Because he put his hands on my sister. Dante's expression didn't change. She was 16. He was 32 and thought being connected to our family meant he could do whatever he wanted. He was wrong. Did you get caught? No. My father made sure of it. He took a drink of wine. That's who I am, Isabella. The man who protects his family by any means necessary. The man who doesn't forgive threats or disrespect. The man who will burn down the world if someone tries to take what's mine. I'm not your sister. No. You're something much more dangerous. He set down his glass. You're the woman I want to keep. The waiter appeared before Isabella could respond, and they ordered food she barely tasted. The conversation shifted to safer topics, work and the city, and nothing that mattered. But underneath it all was the current of everything they weren't saying. They were halfway through dinner when Isabella saw him. Marco Vitale, the cousin of the man Dante had fired, the one who'd confronted her in the parking garage. He was seated across the restaurant with a group of men who all had the same dangerous edge, their suits expensive, but their eyes cold. And he was staring directly at her. Don't look, Dante said quietly. I know he's here. Did you know he'd be here tonight? I suspected. Moretti's is neutral territory. He can't touch you here without starting a war. That's not comforting. It should be. Dante's gaze stayed on her, refusing to give Marco the satisfaction of acknowledgement. It means he's afraid, trying to intimidate you in public because he can't get to you in private. Isabella's pulse kicked up, but she forced herself to take another bite of food, to act like she hadn't noticed the threat sitting 30 feet away. What happens if he tries something? He won't. But if he does... Isabella. Dante's voice dropped, commanding her attention. Look at me. She did. No one in this restaurant will touch you. Not Marco, not his friends, not anyone. Because they all know what I'll do if they try. His hand found hers again across the table. You're safe with me. Always. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust in the absolute certainty in his voice. But she could feel Marco's stare like a physical weight, and the fear that had been humming under her skin since the parking garage incident flared back to life. I need to use the restroom, she said. Dante's expression tightened. I'll walk you. That's not necessary. It's not negotiable. He stood and came around to pull out her chair, his hand settling on the small of her back as he guided her toward the back of the restaurant. Isabella was acutely aware of every eye following them, of Marco's attention tracking their movement. The hallway to the restrooms was empty and dimly lit. Isabella had taken 2 steps toward the ladies' room when Dante's hand closed around her wrist, spinning her back to face him. "What?" He kissed her. Not gentle, not asking permission. He backed her against the wall and claimed her mouth like he'd been starving for it, his hands framing her face, his body pressing against hers in a way that made thinking impossible. Isabella gasped against his lips, and he took advantage, deepening the kiss until she was clinging to his shoulders for balance. This wasn't the careful distance they'd maintained for 2 years. This was possession and promise, and everything they'd been dancing around finally exploding into reality. When he pulled back, they were both breathing hard. "What was that?" she managed. "That was me making sure everyone in this restaurant knows exactly who you belong to." His thumb brushed her swollen bottom lip. "Marco's watching, so is half of Moretti's. By tomorrow morning, the entire city will know you're mine." "You kissed me to make a point?" "I kissed you because I've wanted to for 2 years, and I'm done waiting." His hand slid into her hair, tilting her head back. The audience was just a bonus. Isabella should have been furious, should have shoved him away and reminded him that she wasn't a chess piece in whatever game he was playing with Marco. But his taste was still on her lips, and her body was still humming from the contact. And the truth was, she'd wanted this just as much as he had. "You can't just claim me in public like that," she said. "I just did." "Dante, go to the restroom, Isabella. Fix your lipstick. Then come back to the table and finish your dinner like nothing happened." His smile was dark and satisfied. "While everyone in this restaurant watches and knows exactly what that kiss meant." He stepped back, giving her space but not distance, his eyes never leaving hers. Isabella's hands were shaking as she pushed open the restroom door. She stared at her reflection in the mirror, taking in her flushed cheeks, her swollen lips, the slightly dazed expression that screamed, "I just got thoroughly kissed in a hallway." This was real now. Public. Irreversible. Dante had just announced to everyone who mattered in this city that she was his, and there was no taking it back. Isabella fixed her lipstick with unsteady hands and tried to figure out if she was terrified or exhilarated. She suspected it was both. When she returned to the table, Dante was waiting, his expression calm, but his eyes hot with satisfaction. Marco was still watching from across the restaurant, but his attention had shifted from threatening to calculating. The message had been received. They finished dinner in a bubble of awareness, every casual touch from Dante loaded with meaning, his hand on her lower back when they stood to leave, his fingers lacing through hers as they walked to the car, the way he opened her door and let his hand linger on her hip just a second too long. He was touching her like he owned her, and she was letting him. The drive back to her apartment was quiet, tension humming between them. When Dante pulled up to her building, Isabella expected him to say goodnight, to let her go upstairs and process everything that had just happened. Instead, he got out of the car and came around to open her door. "I'll walk you up," he said. "That's not—" "I'm walking you up, Isabella." She didn't argue. They rode the elevator in silence, standing too close, the air thick with everything that Kiss had started. When they reached her door, Isabella fumbled with her keys, hyper-aware of Dante behind her, his presence overwhelming in the small hallway. She got the door open and turned to say goodnight. Dante was already crowding into her space, his hand coming up to cup her jaw. "Everyone knows now," he said quietly. "No going back." "I know. Are you angry?" Isabella searched his face, looking for regret or manipulation. She found neither, just hunger and possession, and the same certainty that had been there from the beginning. "I should be," she admitted. "You made that decision for both of us." "Yes." "That's not how this works, Dante. You can't just claim people." "I can claim you." His thumb brushed her cheekbone. "Because you want to be claimed. You've wanted it since the first time I looked at you, and you felt it too." He was right, and they both knew it. "This is insane," she whispered. "This is inevitable." He leaned in, his lips brushing her ear. "Sleep well, Bella. Tomorrow the whole city will know you're mine, and then we'll see what you do about it." He kissed her forehead and walked away, leaving Isabella standing in her doorway, her lips still tingling from the kiss in the hallway, her mind spinning with the implications of what he'd just done. She closed the door and leaned against it, her phone already buzzing with texts from numbers she didn't recognize. The news was spreading. Dante Caruso had claimed his financial analyst in the middle of Moretti's, and now everyone wanted to know who Isabella Romano was and what she'd done to catch the attention of the city's most dangerous CEO. Isabella silenced her phone and walked to her bedroom, catching sight of herself in the mirror. She looked different, like a woman who'd just been marked, claimed, made into something public and irreversible. And the terrifying part was how right it felt. Isabella woke to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. She ignored them all and went to work. The office was buzzing by the time she arrived at 8. Conversations stopped mid-sentence when she walked past, heads turning to track her movement through the halls. She kept her expression neutral, her stride confident, refusing to give anyone the satisfaction of seeing her rattled. She'd been claimed by Dante Caruso in the middle of Moretti's. Now she had to decide what she was going to do about it. Her office door was barely closed when it opened again. Dante walked in without knocking, looking entirely too satisfied with himself in a navy suit that probably cost more than her car. "You're causing quite a stir," he said. "I'm causing a stir? You're the one who kissed me in a hallway." "Best decision I made all week." He moved closer, his gaze dragging over her like he was cataloging every detail. "How many marriage proposals have you gotten this morning?" 3, plus 2 job offers, and 1 very inappropriate suggestion from someone claiming to be Marco's associate. Dante's expression went cold. "Forward me that last one." "Already deleted. Isabella." "I can handle inappropriate messages, Dante. What I can't handle is you making decisions about my life without consulting me." She crossed her arms. "You turned me into a public statement last night. I made public what was already true." "That's not the point." "Then what is the point?" He was in her space now, close enough that she could smell his cologne, feel the heat radiating off him. "Tell me you didn't want that kiss. Tell me you regret it. Tell me anything except that you're angry because I stopped pretending." Isabella stared at him, her pulse racing. "I'm angry because you took the choice away from me." "No, I made the choice easier." His hand came up to cup her jaw, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. "You've been fighting this for 2 years because you thought you could walk away. Now you can't. Now everyone knows. And that terrifies you because it means you have to admit what you want. You don't know what I want. You want me. You want this. You're just afraid of what it means." He was right, and she hated him for it. "This changes everything," she said quietly. "Good. I want it to change everything." His grip tightened slightly. "I want you in my life, Isabella. Not hiding in conference rooms, not pretending we're just colleagues. I want you at my table, in my bed, by my side when things get dangerous. I want all of you, and I'm done apologizing for it." Isabella's breath caught. This was the moment. The choice he was forcing her to make. She could walk away, quit her job, leave the city, start over somewhere Dante Caruso's reputation couldn't follow. It would be the smart thing, the safe thing. Or she could stay. Step into this dangerous, complicated, absolutely insane situation and see where it led. "If I do this," she said slowly, "if I choose this, you don't get to make decisions for me. Not about my career, not about my safety, not about anything. We're partners. Or we're nothing." Something fierce and satisfied flashed in his eyes. "Partners." "I mean it, Dante. I'm not some possession you get to show off and control. I know exactly what you are." He leaned in, his lips brushing her ear. You're the woman who found 200,000 in missing funds in one afternoon. The woman who stands up to me when everyone else is afraid. The woman who's about to turn my entire world upside down. He pulled back to look at her. And I can't wait. Isabella felt the last of her resistance crumble. This was insane. Reckless. Everything she'd spent her life avoiding. And she wanted it anyway. Your mother's going to hate me, she said. Dante smiled, slow and dangerous. My mother's going to love you. She's been waiting for someone to challenge me for years. When do I meet her? Sunday dinner. 2 days. His hand slid into her hair. Think you can handle the Caruso family? I've been handling you for 2 years. How much worse can they be? He laughed and kissed her, deep and claiming, right there in her office where anyone could walk in. Isabella kissed him back, her hands fisting in his shirt, 2 years of tension finally breaking into something real and terrifying and absolutely right. When they broke apart, Dante's expression was pure satisfaction. Get back to work, Bella. I want that audit report by Monday. You're seriously thinking about work right now? I'm thinking about tonight. His thumb traced her swollen bottom lip. Dinner at my place. Just us. No audiences, no statements. Just you and me figuring out what this looks like. That sounds dangerous. Everything about us is dangerous. He stepped back, giving her space but not distance. 8 o'clock. I'll send a car. I can drive myself. You can, but you won't. He was at the door now, his hand on the handle. Wear something comfortable. You won't be leaving. He left before she could argue, and Isabella sank into her desk chair, her heart racing and her lips still tingling from the kiss. This was really happening. She was doing this. And for the first time in 2 years, she wasn't afraid of what came next. Dante's penthouse was everything Isabella expected. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, modern furniture that screamed expensive minimalism, art on the walls that was probably worth more than most people's houses. But there were also unexpected details. Books stacked on the coffee table, their spines creased from reading. A framed photo of what had to be his family, all dark hair and sharp features. A worn leather jacket draped over a chair like he'd just taken it off. It made him feel real, not just the dangerous CEO or the Mafia boss, but a man with a life beyond the image. You're staring, Dante said from the kitchen. I'm observing. What's the verdict? You read biographies. That's unexpected. He appeared in the doorway holding 2 wine glasses, his suit jacket gone and his sleeves rolled up. I like knowing how other powerful men failed. Helps me avoid their mistakes. That's very strategic. That's very me. He handed her a glass and gestured to the couch. Dinner's in the oven. We have 20 minutes. Isabella sat, tucking her legs under her. She'd worn jeans and a soft sweater, taking him at his word about comfort. Dante settled beside her, close enough that their thighs touched, his arm stretching along the back of the couch behind her. Tell me about Sunday dinner, she said. What am I walking into? Chaos. My mother cooks enough food for 20 people even though it's just family. My sister will interrogate you about your intentions. My father will pretend he's not impressed while asking you 100 questions about your work. He smiled. And Nonna will either love you immediately or spend the entire meal testing you. That's not intimidating at all. You'll be fine. You survived Moretti's with Marco watching. You can handle my family. Marco's not your mother. True, my mother's more dangerous. His hand dropped to her shoulder, fingers tracing absent patterns. But she'll like you. You're smart. You don't take my shit. And you're not afraid of our world. That's all she's ever wanted for me. Isabella leaned into his touch, letting herself relax for the first time all day. What do you want? You. Exactly as you are. His fingers slid into her hair, gentle but possessive. No games, no pretending. Just this. This is complicated. This is simple. Everything else is complicated. He tugged her closer until she was tucked against his side, her head on his shoulder. I've spent 2 years watching you, wanting you, trying to figure out how to make this work. And the answer was always just this. Stop fighting it and let it happen. They sat like that until the timer went off, wrapped around each other in comfortable silence. Dinner was Italian, homemade, and perfect, and they ate at his dining table with the city lights spread out below them. The conversation flowed easily now that they'd stopped pretending. Work and family, and the 1,000 small details that made up a life. Isabella told him about her college years, the scholarship interviews and late-night study sessions. Dante told her about taking over the family business at 25, the weight of expectation and legacy. By the time they finished eating, Isabella felt like she was seeing him clearly for the first time. Not the dangerous boss or the possessive lover, but the man underneath. Complex and driven and surprisingly vulnerable when he let his guard down. They moved back to the couch with fresh wine, and this time, when Dante pulled her close, she went willingly. His hand traced lazy patterns on her hip, and Isabella let herself sink into the warmth of him. "Stay," he said quietly. "I'm here." "No, stay tonight, tomorrow, as long as you want." His grip tightened. "I'm done with you leaving." Isabella tilted her head back to look at him. "That's very presumptuous. That's very honest." He set down his wine and shifted, pulling her into his lap so she was straddling him, her hands bracing on his shoulders. "I want you here, Isabella. In my space, in my bed. I want to wake up with you and know you're not going to run. I don't run. You've been running for 2 years. I was being professional. You were being afraid." His hand settled on her waist, warm and sure. "But you're not afraid anymore, are you?" Isabella looked at him, at the hunger and certainty in his eyes, and knew he was right. She wasn't afraid. She was terrified and exhilarated, and absolutely certain this was exactly where she was supposed to be. "No," she whispered. "I'm not afraid." Dante's smile was slow and devastating. "Good." He kissed her then, deep and claiming, his hands sliding up her back to pull her closer. Isabella melted into him, 2 years of tension finally breaking into pure need. This wasn't the careful kiss in the hallway or the quick claiming in her office. This was promise and possession, and everything they'd been holding back. When he stood, lifting her with him, Isabella wrapped her legs around his waist and let him carry her to the bedroom. The city lights filtered through the windows, casting shadows across the massive bed. Dante set her down gently, his hands already working the hem of her sweater. "Last chance to change your mind," he said. "Stop talking." He laughed and pulled her sweater over her head, his gaze dragging over her with such raw hunger that Isabella felt it like a physical touch. She reached for his shirt, fumbling with the buttons until he took over, stripping it off with efficient movements. "Come here," he said, his voice rough. Isabella moved into his arms, and the feel of skin against skin made her gasp. Dante's hands were everywhere, mapping her curves, learning her body with focused intensity. He backed her toward the bed, his lips trailing down her neck, teeth grazing her collarbone. "You're mine now," he murmured against her skin. "Everyone knows it, but I want you to know it too." "I know. Say it." Isabella's breath hitched as his hand slid lower. "I'm yours. Again. I'm yours, Dante." His smile against her throat was pure satisfaction. Then his hands were on her jeans, and the world narrowed to just this. Just them. Just the inevitable conclusion they'd been building toward for 2 years. The rest blurred into heat and need, and the sound of her name on his lips, as he made good on every promise those dark eyes had been making, since the first time he'd looked at her. Isabella woke to sunlight and soreness and the unmistakable feeling of being thoroughly claimed. She was sprawled across Dante's chest, his arm wrapped around her waist, his breathing deep and even. The sheets were tangled around their legs, one pillow on the floor, the other shoved against the headboard. Evidence of a night that had exceeded every expectation. Isabella shifted slightly and winced. Every muscle ached in the best possible way, her thighs protesting the movement. She could feel marks on her neck and collarbone, the slight burn of beard burn on her skin. Dante's hand tightened on her waist. Don't even think about leaving. I wasn't. Good. He pulled her closer, his lips finding the marks on her neck with satisfied precision. Because we're not done. We're not? Not even close. He rolled, pinning her beneath him, his eyes dark with renewed hunger. I have 2 years to make up for, Bella, and we're just getting started. Sunday dinner at the Caruso house was exactly as chaotic as Dante had promised. His mother, Carmela, was a force of nature. Small and elegant, with sharp eyes that missed nothing, she'd taken one look at Isabella and pulled her into a hug that smelled like garlic and expensive perfume. Finally, she'd said, someone who doesn't look at him like he walks on water. Dante's sister, Lucia, was equally direct. You're the financial analyst, the one who found the theft. That's me. Good. We need someone smart in this family. She'd linked her arm through Isabella's and led her to the dining room. Fair warning, Nonna's going to ask inappropriate questions, and Papa's going to pretend he's not already planning your wedding. She wasn't wrong. Dinner was loud and warm and overwhelming in the best way. Dante's father, Antonio, asked her a dozen questions about her work, nodding approvingly at her answers. His grandmother spent the entire meal watching Isabella with calculating eyes, occasionally firing off questions in rapid Italian that Dante translated with obvious amusement. And through it all, Dante kept his hand on her thigh under the table, his thumb tracing absent circles, his attention split between family conversation and the woman beside him. She's perfect, Carmela announced over dessert. When's the wedding? Mama. Don't mama me. You brought her to Sunday dinner. That means something. It means I wanted you to meet her. It means you're serious. She turned to Isabella. He's serious about you. Are you serious about him? Isabella felt every eye at the table turn to her. This was the test. The moment where she either committed or walked away. She looked at Dante, at the slight tension in his shoulders, the way his hand had stilled on her leg. He was trying to look unconcerned, but she could see the truth in his eyes. He was waiting for her answer too. Yes, Isabella said clearly. I'm serious about him. Carmela's smile was triumphant. Good. Then you'll come to dinner every Sunday, and you'll tell me if he does anything stupid. I can do that. The conversation moved on, but Dante's hand found hers under the table, squeezing once in silent gratitude. When they left 2 hours later, stuffed with food and overwhelmed by Caruso family energy, Isabella felt like she'd passed some crucial test. That wasn't so bad, she said, as Dante drove them back to his penthouse. You survived Nonna. That's impressive. Your mother already has our wedding planned. She had it planned the day I hired you. He glanced at her, something soft in his expression. Thank you. For what? For saying yes. For staying. For giving this a chance. His hand found her thigh again, familiar and possessive. For being exactly what I needed. Isabella covered his hand with hers. Where do we go from here? Forward. Together. He pulled into his building's garage and cut the engine. Your things are being moved to my place tomorrow. Excuse me? You heard me. I'm done with you having an apartment across town. I want you here, with me, where you belong. You can't just decide that. I just did. Argue with me upstairs. Isabella stared at him, torn between exasperation and something that felt dangerously close to joy. This was her life now. Dante making high-handed decisions, and her fighting him on principle while secretly loving every minute of it. "You're impossible," she said. "You love it. I'm still bringing this up at the next board meeting." Dante laughed and kissed her, deep and claiming, right there in the garage. When he pulled back, his expression was pure satisfaction. "Bring it up whenever you want, Bella. Everyone already knows you're mine. Might as well make it official." Isabella followed him upstairs, her hand in his, her future uncertain and terrifying, and absolutely perfect. 3 months later, Carmela got her wish. Dante proposed over Sunday dinner, with his entire family watching, and his grandmother crying happy tears into her wine. Isabella said yes before he even finished asking. Because some things really were inevitable, and some dangerous men were worth the risk. If you enjoyed Dante and Isabella's story, subscribe to Mafia Tales for more dangerous romances where powerful men meet their match. Join our members area for exclusive extended scenes and early access to new stories.